Hello, my name's David Runciman, and this is Past, Present, Future. In our series about the great political films, we have reached the 1980s. That is, the 1980s is when this film was released, in 1980, but it's set in late 16th century Japan. It's by the great Japanese director Akira Kurosawa, and it is the great film about the politics of deception. It's called Kagemusha. The term imposter syndrome is one of those ones that I feel never was around 10 or 15 years ago. I don't remember it. And now it's become ubiquitous. It's a bit like gaslighting, which is another term I don't remember from maybe 15 years ago. And now you barely hear about anything else. Gaslighting has a very specific origin. It comes from a film, Gaslight, and before that, a play. Imposter syndrome also has a very specific and quite recent history. It was coined as a term in the late 1970s by a psychologist who wanted to identify a phenomenon that was increasingly being recognized, which was of high-achieving people, particularly high-achieving women, arriving in positions of authority and power, believing, despite the fact that they were completely qualified for those roles, that they weren't qualified, that they were just one mistake, one misstep away from exposure, and that they would be caught out. They would be found out. It's a term that has quite a lot of critics. I think there are many people who believe it isn't a real syndrome. It's not a psychological syndrome. It's not recognized by the medical profession. There is also, I think, a sense that, insofar as it is a syndrome, everyone feels it at some time or another. To be completely honest, as I sit here talking about great films, I feel I'm one step away from exposing myself as not qualified to do so. But the other thing about it is that it may be misnamed because the point about imposter syndrome is that the people who suffer from it are not imposters. So there's something a little confusing here. You only suffer from imposter syndrome if you're not an imposter. You are qualified. You do belong in that role. Your fear is that you're not, but it is a delusion, the delusion of being an imposter. And there is another kind of imposter syndrome, which has a longer history and is much more familiar in literature, in art, in film. And that's the experience of actually being an imposter. So unlike those who suffer from imposter syndrome, some, not many, but some human beings have also had to deal with the experience of knowing that they genuinely do not belong, that they genuinely are not qualified for the role that they found themselves in. They are imposters, or to use another word, they are impersonators of the people who had the power, were qualified for the power, belonged in the high office. And for whatever reason, some human beings have found themselves having to pretend that they belong. And of course, it's a completely different psychological condition because the fear of exposure is very real. One misstep will lead to ruin. And it requires different skills. It requires the skills of impersonation, but it also requires a certain kind of psychological resilience to know that you are genuinely living a lie. It's the story of the prince and the pauper, not just the prince being played by the pauper, but the pauper being played by the prince. And it raises all those questions about what is it that makes someone fit for a role to be a prince? Is it simply birth? Is it charisma? Is it some qualifications of intelligence or courage? Or is it just the clothes? Is it being able to carry it off by making the movements, by looking the part? Is playing the part just looking the part? Whether you're trying to be someone powerful or you're a powerful person trying to pass yourself off as a pauper. It's the story of Pygmalion. It's the story of a genre of movies about people who stumble into the office of the American presidency. A great film starring Peter Sellers called Being There, which is about a humble gardener who becomes president of the United States. There's another film called Dave, which is about someone who is the lookalike of the president. And then when the president gets shot, the lookalike has to play the part. And always the question is raised, in the playing of the part, is there a point at which it is possible to be confident as the impersonator that you've got it right? Or are you always one step away from exposure? And that is the subject of Kagemusha. That final plot, Dave, that's the film that this one resembles, or rather, Dave resembles Kagemusha. And to my mind, Kagemusha is the greatest by far of all of these films. Kurosawa, its director, is probably better known outside of Japan for other of his movies. His three best-known films in the West are Rashomon, one of his early films, which told the story of the death of a samurai from 7 different perspectives. It's about unreliable narration, and it created its own term for a kind of syndrome or effect, the Rashomon effect, which is what happens when a single event is told from multiple different perspectives. There is The Seven Samurai, the film that became The Magnificent Seven when it was translated to the American West. One of Kurosawa's very final films, Ran, which was his retelling of the story of King Lear, was also a huge hit outside of Japan. But my favorite by far is Kagemusha. It is one of my favorite films. And that's partly because it has got the most perfect opening scene. The first 3 or 4 minutes of this film are unimprovable. One of my favorite sequences in all of cinema, in its simplicity, but also in the way it sets up everything that is to follow. All of the questions about the nature of political power and political impersonation are there in that first scene. It is very simple. It is a simple scene. We just see 3 men sitting in a room. It's an austere room, but it's also clearly a grand room. We are told we are in late 16th century Japan. We're probably in a palace or a castle. And these 3 men are sitting and they look the same. They are all dressed the same in a fairly fierce warrior costume. They all look the same age. They are roughly early to mid-50s. That's what it looks like. And they have the same features. They have the same facial hair. They all have the same kind of beard. It's a beard that's flecked with grey, topped with a fairly fearsome moustache. They all look quite frightening. They are black-eyed and beetle-browed, and they all look deadly serious. And we discover very quickly who these 3 people are. The one in the middle that we are looking at directly, center of the shot, is a warlord called Shingen, Takeda Shingen, the head of the Takeda clan. And he is involved in a brutal struggle for power in late 16th century Japan. The year, we are told, is 1572. There is a 3-way struggle going on for power, including to take the capital, Kyoto. And this man is one of those 3 warlords competing for ultimate power. The person to his left as we look, but to his right as he is sitting, we discover is his brother, his younger brother, though they look very similar in age, and also clearly his confidant and his right-hand man, his chief of staff. This is the guy who gives him advice. And in their very early exchanges, we discover that the brother's role includes sometimes impersonating the warlord, because they look so similar, and because the great Shingen cannot be in 2 places at once, but also because his life is always at risk, and it is sometimes very useful to have a decoy. And the title of this film, Kagemusha, literally translates as, well, shadow warrior is the usual translation, but what it means is political decoy. So he is sometimes the Kagemusha to the warlord. They look similar enough that certainly from a distance, in a parade, in a ceremony, maybe if the troops are far enough away, he can pass for his brother. And so that's part of his multiple roles. So then the question is, who is the 3rd man in the room who looks like the other 2? The brother says to the warlord, I found this man today, and I was immediately struck by the fact he is your spitting image. He is your double, to use a term they wouldn't have used in late 16th century Japan. He is your doppelganger. The warlord says, where did you find him? And the brother says, well, I found him at the crucifixion grounds because we were about to execute him. He is a petty thief. We were going to crucify him today. It should be said, crucifixion here doesn't have any religious connotations. In late 16th century Japan, Christianity had arrived. The Portuguese, among others, were in Japan trying to convert the locals. Anyone who's seen the current TV series Shogun knows that story, which is just in the background of this one, but barely features at all. There is just one scene in this film when one warlord is going out to battle, and we are shown a group of priests high up on the hill blessing him, a group of Christian priests, and he acknowledges them. There's just a hint that somewhere in the background of this civil strife, foreigners, outsiders, Christians are also just starting to get involved. But that is not what this bit of the story is about. Crucifixion does not mean that, anything to do with that. Crucifixion means routine execution. Its role in Japan was what it had been in the Roman period before Christ was crucified, and it became something else. It just was a particularly nasty but very routine way of executing people. And it wasn't the worst in Japan. Even in this film, we are given hints of far worse deaths, including being boiled alive in water or in oil. It's a grim time, and it's a time of utterly brutal justice. This man was at the crucifixion grounds, and suddenly the brother of the warlord noticed that he was the spitting image of his brother. The warlord says, well, did no one else spot this? Did no one else spot that they were about to crucify a man who looks just like me? Did no one comment on it? And his brother says, no, because they couldn't see it. And the reason they couldn't see it is he was in rags, and he is a petty thief, and he was about to be crucified. So no one was thinking of you. You have to put him in the costume to see it, but I, your brother, saw it even when he was in rags, even when he was on his way to the cross, because I know you. I know you so intimately that I could see just how close the resemblance is, even though nothing about the way he presented at that point, a criminal on his way to his death, has anything to do with you. But look at him, he says. Look at this man. Isn't it like looking in the mirror? At that point, they then have a moment of panic, and they both think, oh my God, what if this man is our brother? Because their father, the previous warlord, clearly had a reputation for having children here, there, and everywhere. And in nervousness, the warlord says, are we sure actually he's not our half-brother? Could our father have fathered this man? And the brother, the aide, says, no, it's all right. I've checked. He's from a part of Japan in the north that even our father wasn't fathering children up there. It's just a coincidence. But I thought he could be very useful for you or for us because the resemblance is better than mine, and we need someone who really, really looks like you. And while you're watching this scene, you are looking at the third man who has said nothing and done nothing, who is discovering his fate as we are discovering his fate. And you wonder, well, what's this guy thinking? And the assumption is he must be utterly terrified. First of all, he was on his way to a horrible death. He's been plucked from that. He's been dressed up in this elaborate warrior outfit. He is sitting in front of the two most powerful men he will ever meet who have power of life and death over him. They're talking about him like a commodity, like a thing that they found on the street. The expectation is that he must be utterly cowed, but he's not. He is utterly furious. And at the end of this little exchange between the warlord and his brother, he bursts out in outrage. He is disgusted by what he's been hearing, at the thought that he is being described as the criminal and he is being cast for the role of the impersonator. And he screams in the face of the warlord, you are the criminal. And he says the thing that is often said to warlords by people who have lost the will to live, or is said of warlords by historians who are safe in their studies. The thing that was sometimes said of Napoleon, if you kill one man, you're a common murderer. If you kill a million, you're a hero and a warrior. And he says to the hero and the warrior, why am I the criminal? You're the killer. You're the man who murders and slaughters and brings chaos and war and misery in your wake. All I am is a petty thief. I'm no harm compared to you. Therefore, you are the fraud. You're the one sitting up there as though you were the high and mighty above it all. Whereas you are the real villain. You are playing the part of a god when you are cheaper than I am. And at that point, you think, this is not going to end well for the third man in the scene. You do not talk to a man who has the power of crucifixion over you like this. And at the end of his little speech, he says, I was dead anyway. I don't care what you do to me. And in the English translation, the next words are, boil me or broil me. That is, water or oil. I don't care. The warlord and his brother look at each other, and you do wonder as the viewer, is it going to be boiling or broiling? And the warlord says to his brother, yes, I can see he could be quite useful. Take him away, train him up, make use of him. The implication being that outburst of fury, that reckless telling of the truth, was a sign that this man has got something. Maybe he has got whatever is needed to play the part of a warlord. There's something in him which is not just the common thief as they see this lowlife. The outburst saves him because it makes them believe maybe he could play the part. It all happens in about 3 or 4 minutes. Everything in the film follows from that scene. We are given a little bit of context beforehand. There's a little bit of written narrative on the screen, which tells us that we are in 1572, and this is at the heart of this deep, vicious, intractable war for control of Japan. It's mainly siege warfare. It's brutal. The killing is terrible and terrifying. But lest anyone think that this was a peculiarly Japanese kind of horror, 1572, if you want to transplant this story to Europe, 1572 was the year of the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France, at the heart of the French civil wars of the period, which were just as nasty, just as brutal, just as intractable. They were the wars that drove Montaigne into his tower. He couldn't bear it anymore. There's nothing particularly Japanese about the slaughter in this film, though the society that we see in its hierarchy, its ritual, in its formality is very different from 16th century France. And it's not doctrinal conflict as far as we can tell in Japan. This is clan war. This is all about family and bloodlines, of course. French politics was about family and bloodlines too, but cut across and shot through with the wars, the religious wars of the Reformation. There's nothing distinctly horrific about what's happening in Japan, but we are given a clear sense that these wars are really entrenched. Very, very hard for anyone to gain the ultimate victory. But somebody is close, and the person who is close is Shingen. He is close to taking Kyoto. And if he takes Kyoto, he might win. And his two rivals are aware they're in a relatively weak position. So it's at the height of his power that we first see him. The other thing to say about that first scene is it does set up the puzzle of the film. There is a question which is not articulated by any of the three men, but it's hovering in the background, which is, how is this going to work? Because what's distinctive about the third man, the Kagemusha, who's never given a name, he is just the Kagemusha. What's distinctive about him is his extraordinary facial resemblance to the warlord. And the two men are played by the same actor. They are the same person. They look more alike than the brother does to the brother. So this advantage can only really be made use of close up, from a distance, in a ceremony, when parading in front of soldiers, at a siege where you want the decoy just in case someone tries to take a potshot. Facial resemblance doesn't matter. If you dress the brother up to look alike, that will do. Facial resemblance only matters if you are face to face with this man, in an intimate setting, indoors, at the court, at council, among friends. But then it's not going to work, because these are the people who know the warlord intimately. Are they going to believe that mere facial resemblance is enough? Are they going to be persuaded by a man who is the spitting image of the man that they know, if they are close enough to see how he behaves, how he reacts, what he says? When he's parading on a horse in front of the troops, he doesn't say anything or do anything. But sitting in council, how can he carry it off? And that is the theme of this film. That is the question that runs from the beginning to the end. How do you carry it off? And quite quickly, the question is put to the test, because the warlord, Shingen, is hit by a potshot. The real man is hit by a potshot. It's a kind of fluke. The guns back then were not particularly accurate, but we have a scene in which we are shown how, in a complicated and intricate piece of cinematic theatre, how during the siege of Kyoto, the warlord is hit. He is wounded, but there's a chance that he's going to die. And then panic sets in, because this man had been on the brink of victory. But to lose the warlord will undermine all of the advantages that the clan has. There will be a battle for succession. This man is the man that everyone is afraid of. His heirs are not feared. If he is truly dead, or if he is going to die, all advantage has been lost, and they will have to withdraw from Kyoto. They will have to go back to their stronghold, and they will have to cede all of their advantage. And as he is dying, Shingen recognizes what is to come, and he decides to retreat. They have to withdraw from the siege. And by withdrawing, they signal to their enemies that something has happened. No one knows that he's been hit. No one knows where he is. No one knows what his fate is. The only thing they can see is that an army that was on the brink of victory is retreating. So something has happened. And the two rival warlords send out their spies to try and work out, is he really dead? Was he hit? What's going on? Is this a trick? Is this a fake retreat, a kind of feint? We know that he's dying, and then we see him die. Just before he dies, he lets it be known that his final will and testament is that his death should be concealed for 3 years. Because once it's known he's dead, his clan will be vulnerable to attack. But if for 3 years they can go back, retrench, make themselves secure in their own territory, then his death can be announced and the contest can begin again. So for 3 years, he says, my death must be kept a secret. And at that point, they need the Kagemusha. They need the impersonator. But they're going to need him to impersonate this man, not just in public settings, but in private ones too. And that immediately sets up the next puzzle or dilemma, which is there will have to be a conspiracy around this, a conspiracy of silence. So a certain number of people are going to have to know that the warlord is dead and that someone who is a common thief is impersonating him for this to work, because the impersonator needs to be shielded from exposure. And that means he will need people around him, if he's asked a question, to answer it for him. If there is some rule of etiquette he doesn't know, to explain it to him, to cover for him, to cover up for him. But the trouble with a conspiracy is the more conspirators there are, the more likely it is that the news will leak. So some fine balance has to be struck here between having enough people to protect this man so that he won't be exposed, and not having too many people so that someone will talk. And it's all brutal. When the warlord dies, his death is witnessed not just by his doctor, who can be trusted not to talk, but by his doctor's assistant. So his doctor's assistant has to be killed. He is instantly put to death because he has seen something he shouldn't see. A select group of trusted retainers are given the task of becoming the retainers of the impersonator. 5 men whose job it is, in the palace, at court, to protect him and to surround him. And that's what they do. The other warlords, the other clan leaders who serve under the overall leader, Shingen, they also know because they know that their leader is dead. So there are 2 groups of people who know. The servants, a very small group, and there may be 8 or 10 senior generals who also know. Everybody else has to be kept in the dark. And for 3 years, that's the mission. And it's really difficult. And there are a number of brilliant scenes where exposure is a whisker away. Talk about imposter syndrome. You can see the fear on the face of the impersonator when he realizes he doesn't know what to do. The first of them happens when he arrives back at the court, at the palace of Shingen, of the Takeda clan. And he has to be the warrior, be the warlord in front of his family. His son knows the truth because his son is one of the leading generals. But his son, Shingen's son, is not his heir. He has made his grandson his heir because his son, we discover, was the result of a liaison with the wife of a rival conquered member of a different clan. And so his blood is not good enough. He wants to dilute the blood by a generation. So the line of succession is a small boy, he's probably 6 or 7 years old, is the nominated heir, should the grandfather die. And the father of that boy, the son of the warlord, is the regent. He will run the realm, the kingdom, on behalf of his son. The regent knows, the grandson doesn't know. The grandfather is dead and has been replaced by an impersonator. When he arrives back in court, everyone knows that he's been ill. It's not a secret that this man has come close to death, but they are being told he survived. And here he is, a little changed, a little shaken. If he looks a bit different to you, the reason is because of his illness. If he seems subdued and quiet, it's because he's been ill. And he sits on his small throne. It's not an ornate throne, but on his seat of power, to be greeted by his people. And that includes a formal meeting with his grandson, the heir. His grandson approaches him with all due deference, looks up at him, and says to the assembled court, "That's not my grandfather. I know my grandfather, and that's not my grandfather." Horror, terror on the faces of all, not just of the impersonator, but the other generals too. And then the brother of Shingen, says to the grandson, "Go a little closer. He's been in the wars, he's been ill, but go and look at him, look in his face, because the advantage this man has, the only advantage the impersonator has, is his face looks the same. His manner is not the same. He doesn't have the authority. He has none of the experience. But he does close up look the same. Go closer," he's told the grandson. So he goes closer, he looks at him, he pokes him, and he says, "You're right, he has changed. He's not the same man." He doesn't say he's not my grandfather. He says he's not the same man. And someone says to the boy, "What do you notice is different?" And the boy says, "I'm not afraid of him anymore." And everyone in the court bursts out laughing. The generals, the laughter of relief because they've got away with it. That's fine as an answer. He's been changed is fine. He's not the same man is not fine. And because the boy, the heir, is not afraid of his grandfather anymore, they bond. The impersonator picks him up, puts him on his knee, takes his helmet off, puts it on the little boy, and within a short time, they have become friends. And actually, it's clear that the heir has a much closer bond to the impersonator than he ever did to his actual grandfather. The other people who have to be deceived are the warlord's mistresses, his concubines, because everybody understands it's going to be extremely hard for the impersonator to pass himself off as the real thing in bed with these women. So it's announced, of course, he's been very, very gravely ill, and therefore we have to be careful with him. And his doctors have instructed him to avoid some of the activities that he would have indulged in previously. One of them is to ride a particular horse, a wild horse. He was known to be the only person who could tame this horse. Were the impersonator to get on the back of this horse and be thrown off, everybody would know. So it's announced that his doctors have forbidden it. And it also conveniently turns out that his doctors have forbidden him to have sex because it's too strenuous. What he is allowed to do is to get drunk. So we see a scene in which he sits with his concubines. He looks extremely uncomfortable. They look extremely dubious that this is the man. But the thing about being drunk is that actually it becomes easier to impersonate him because he's ridiculous. Drunk people are ridiculous. The warlord used to get drunk and not be himself. It's the perfect way of being the person you're impersonating by not being yourself. He gets away with it. He also discovers that he's got a great advantage in playing this role because the man he's impersonating was known as the Mountain. And at one point, the grandson says to his fake grandfather, "Why are you called the Mountain? Why do you have that nickname?" The impersonator looks terrified. He doesn't know. But luckily, one of the attendants is there to step in and explain. And he says to the grandson, "You know why your grandfather is called the Mountain, because he is the great immovable force. He is the protector of his people and his clan, because he can never be moved. He is implacable. He is as strong and as solid as a mountain. Nothing can move him, and that is how he keeps us safe. He is known as the person who doesn't move." So his calling card as a warlord is his immovability. And the impersonator is frequently told by the other generals, who are his guides, all you have to do is do nothing. All we are asking you to be is the implacable one. Say nothing. React to nothing. Have no views about anything. If we have to convene a meeting of the clans and all the people who come include many who don't know you're not the real thing, in order to be the real thing, all you have to do is remain silent, because then you are the Mountain. And this is what happens. There is a meeting of the clan. They are summoned to decide what they should do because the clan is under real pressure. The rumors have spread that the great warlord is dead. They can't quell those rumors outside, but they are trying to keep up the pretense. But to keep up the pretense, they have to have a meeting of people who might expose the pretense. So all the generals meet and other warriors meet too. Some of the generals know that the man who presides over this meeting is simply an impersonator, but most people in the room are meant to believe it's the real thing. He is told before the meeting, do nothing. You will be given all sorts of different kinds of advice about what we should do. Should we attack? Should we defend? Should we retrench? Should we rebuild the army? Should we raise more soldiers, more taxes? This is a court of war, and you are going to be given conflicting advice. What you do is you nod, you acknowledge it silently, you look implacable, and then at the end of the meeting, you say, "Thank you, gentlemen. Now I'm going to bed." And that will be in keeping with the man you're impersonating. You will make no decision. You will simply be the one who doesn't move. And then we will decide what to do next. So he agrees to do that. He sits there implacably. But his son, the one who is the regent to the grandson, but is furious that he's been passed over for the throne itself, tries to goad the impersonator, essentially seems to have resolved that he wants to bring an end to the charade. And so during this meeting, he turns to the man who can say nothing, because as soon as he opens his mouth, people will realize he's not the great warlord. And he says to him, "Father, what do you think?" He knows it's not his father. He wants to flush him out. By this point, the impersonator has learned to control the look of panic that crosses his face. He's managed to turn the look of panic into a look of fury. He crosses his brows and he says, "The mountain does not move." It's his catchphrase. It serves all purposes and all occasions. Everybody bows. The sun is put in his place. He then says, "Thank you, gentlemen. I am going to bed." He's got away with it. The son, who is so furious that his attempt to call out the impersonator results in him being called out and his bluff being called, decides to take matters into his own hand, and unilaterally he goes on the rampage. He starts attacking the enemies of the clan. The mountain will not move, so the sun will move on behalf of the mountain. And that is another way of flushing out the impersonator, because now it's clear to everybody that they are back at war. And if they are at war, their best chance of survival is if their enemies believe that the warlord is not dead. But the only way to persuade their enemies of that is for the warlord to be seen at the battle place, at the scene of battle. The impersonator now has to come out from the court. He has to go to the battleground, to the siege, and he has to sit on his little throne there. He has to be the mountain, but he has to be the mountain who has moved. The mountain is now on the road. And this is also fraught with danger, because now, even though he can give no orders, no commands, he's not in charge of this army. He is nonetheless at the heart of the battle. And he is told, once again, "We're going to take you there. We are going to sit you there. You're going to be surrounded by people who will protect you. The battle will rage around you. We need the enemy to know that you are there. If they know that the mountain has moved, they will retreat. But you must do nothing. You must say nothing. You mustn't bat an eyelid or flinch. You have to be completely implacable." So he sits there, and around him the battle rages, and you can see in his face the terror. He's a thief. He narrowly escaped crucifixion. He's now been living the most bizarre sort of life, every day one step away from exposure. But he's never seen a battle. He's never been in war. And it's a completely different kind of terror, because they are under attack. And actually, the people around him start dying. His attendants, including one of the attendants who's one of the very, very few people who knows he is not the warlord, he is just a common or garden thief, nonetheless takes a bullet for him. And men sitting behind him are shot one by one, and he mustn't move. And you can see him fighting to keep control of his fear. He is terrified, but he doesn't move. And at the crucial moment, a group of horsemen arrive to take out the whole group surrounding the warlord. And then they look and they see it is the man himself, and they retreat. It works. Once it can be seen close up enough that the warlord is not dead, it works its magic. And the Kagemusha has achieved everything that they wanted him to achieve, because he has persuaded people that he is the real thing. And at the end of that scene, he looks around him in bafflement at what's taken place. And then he looks down at his feet, and one of the men who has been serving him, who has been protecting him, is dead. And another one says to him, "Look, they are dying for you. They are willing to die for you. You are the person for whom these men now have to give up their lives." And you see the impersonator, who rarely says much, trying to fathom this mystery. He is not the warlord. He is not the man for whom these men are trained to sacrifice their lives. And here they are having sacrificed their lives to him. So does this now make him something closer to the real deal? People have actually died to keep him alive. The man who was a step away from crucifixion is now having people sacrifice themselves for him. What does that make him? Who is he now? He's not the warlord, but he has just done the thing that made the warlord master of all he surveyed. He has, through the force of his presence, his physical presence, won the battle. We then move forward in time. It's not clear exactly how long, but this has now been playing out not just for months, but for a couple of years. We are back in the palace. One of the things that is clear is that the impersonator and the grandson now have a very, very strong bond. They are playmates. These two people have bonded. But one day, the impersonator is missing. A group of people come to see the supposed warlord, and he's nowhere to be found. And then it turns out that he has made the fatal mistake. He has finally slipped up. What he has decided to do to ingratiate himself even further with his supposed grandson is to get on the horse that only the warlord could ride and ride it. The grandson likes playing horses, so the impersonator wants to show him what it looks like when his grandfather rides an actual horse. But he can't ride the horse. The horse is the one creature who knows him for a fake. And he calls him out by throwing him. And so he is found lying on the ground, injured and in pain. So that's the first clue. If this truly were the warlord, the horse wouldn't have thrown him. But he might get away with it. He hasn't ridden the horse for a while. He's been sick. Everybody knows he's getting older. But as he lies on the ground, his clothes are ripped. And in a panic, some of his concubines run out to tend to him. And one of them looks down at his bare torso and says he doesn't have the scar. I have to say, this is the one bit in the film I'm not completely convinced by, because we are a couple of years on here. Are we meant to believe that for 2 years, the doctor has said this man is not to get into bed with these women? Maybe. Or are we meant to believe that when he does get into bed with these women, he never fully disrobes? Maybe. It's not explained. It looks a little contrived. At the same time, what's clear is that the concubines never really believed in him. I mean, they probably knew from the off, but they also knew it was not in their interests to expose him. But now, as he lies naked on the ground, having been thrown by the horse, and suspicion is everywhere, they can voice their suspicions. And they say, there is no scar. He does not bear the wounds of the warlord. And it's over. If there is no scar, there is no scar. There is an intimacy beyond facial recognition, which is bodily recognition. And that is the test he fails. And somebody says, why did he do it? Why did he get on the horse? I mean, he's come so far. It's a miracle we've survived to this point. We're nearly at the 3 years. We've nearly amazingly done the thing that we were tasked to do by our dead master. And this idiot blew it at the last moment. And someone else says, after the battle, he started to believe in himself. The battle changed him. He is more confident in the role now. He is overconfident in the role because he did something which was the real thing. He really had people die for him, and he really saved the day. He was the warlord. He wasn't impersonating a warlord in that battle. He was the warlord by impersonating a warlord. And now he's gone too far. And it's over. And it is over. They say to him, you're done. They give him back his rags. They kick him out. Some of them are grateful for the service that he's performed, and so they give him a bit of money, but they send him on his way as a beggar. And some of the common soldiers pelt him with mud when he says, please, can I come back? Please, can I just say goodbye to he can't call him his grandson, but can I say goodbye to the boy? The boy loves him. We know that the boy genuinely loves him. That's the other genuine thing that he's achieved. That is a real relationship. And they just hound him out, and he's gone. And it becomes clear that the pretense is over. So a little before the 3 years are up, they will have to announce to the world that the great warlord is dead. And so the announcement is made. A great formal funeral service takes place. And we see the impersonator on the edge of the crowd watching the funeral service. And he looks completely haunted. He looks deranged. He looks like a man who has no idea who he is. But he also looks heartbroken. He is grieving. Is he grieving for the man who he was for 3 years and who is now officially dead? Is he grieving for his relationship with the grandson? Is he grieving for the life that he's lost? He's been leading a life of luxury for 3 years, and now he's basically on the streets again. Or is he grieving for himself? We don't know. And so the film moves to its climax. The climax of this film is a real event. All of these events are loosely based on what happened in Japan between 1572 and 1575, including the fact that this warlord was injured, and they did try to cover up his death for a while. The detailed story of the impersonator is fictitious. But the trajectory of that story is real. For a couple of years, the death was concealed until it could be concealed no longer. And when it could be concealed no longer, the war resumed, the great civil contest. But now it resumed not with the warlord in charge, but with his son in charge. And in the film, his son has more or less been sent mad by the experience of having to serve the thief as though that man were his father. And he is constantly goaded on, it has to be said, by some of his advisors, pushing against this, desperate to have his head, desperate to be in charge. And the only way he can assert himself against the mountain, the fake mountain, is not to be the mountain. If the mountain won't move, he will move. If the mountain doesn't attack, he will attack. If the mountain waits for his enemies to come to him, and we're meant to believe that was the mountain's genius as a war strategist, he always invited the attack on. The hot-headed son will take the attack to his enemies. And it results in a great climactic battle, which is a recreation of a real battle that happened in Japan in 1575. It's the Battle of Nagashino, which is notorious, celebrated in Japanese history for a number of reasons. It was a decisive battle in this internecine war, and it did lead to the destruction eventually of the Takeda clan, because they were decisively defeated. By taking the attack to the enemy, the young, hot-headed son destroys everything that his father had built up. The battle is also known because it marks a shift in Japanese warfare. Notoriously, the Takeda clan attack on horses, and they are confronted behind a kind of palisade by an army equipped with the latest guns. And horses versus guns, even in 1575, where the guns are very primitive and pretty inaccurate, nonetheless, it is no contest. Apparently, historians argue endlessly about whether this has been overdone, and really it was just a case of if you bring a horse to a gunfight, you're going to lose. But nonetheless, because the Takeda clan also had guns, but nonetheless, this battle is some kind of combination, certainly in Japanese mythology, of what for us would be the Battle of Agincourt crossed with the charge of the Light Brigade, something like that. And we see one by one these cavalry charges, and though we don't see the slaughter, we see the guns fire. And Kurosawa is a genius at filming battle scenes. He has the advantage, and this film is full of battle scenes, that all of the soldiers of all of the different clans and all of the different subgroupings of clans, they all have flags in their backs. They have a little stick with a colourful flag on it. So every scene that you see, no matter how many thousands of soldiers are in it, thousands of extras, none of this is CGI. It's all been done for real, for fake, for real. That's the theme of the film. You can see who's who. You see, and it's beautiful, these swarms of colours like colourful insects moving around the battlefield. But in this case, the soldiers on horses with their little flags are mown down, and it's carnage. And at the end of the battle, it's all over. We also see the generals who have served first the real warlord, and then, without frustration, with a kind of iron discipline, they have served the fake warlord, now having to serve the son. And they watch the son destroy everything that they have spent 3 years trying to preserve. And you can see it starts to send them mad too. There is a feeling towards the end of this film that the shift from fakery, the impersonator pretending to be a warlord, to real, a young warrior, a great general. This boy has won great victories already in his life. A genuine warlord, from fake to real, is a disaster. Because actually, during the period when it was fake, people were their best selves because they were having to be their best selves to keep up the pretense. Everybody during the period where the conspiracy is at work is very, very careful to do the right thing. And they're also very cautious. And the caution is the strength of this clan. Actually, whether by accident or by design, the dying instruction of the warlord is a kind of genius. You must pretend, because in the pretense is the discipline. And the discipline is the thing that prevents impetuous, rage-driven military action. When the pretense has gone, when the funeral has happened, when it has been announced to the world that the great man is dead, and people are free once again to be themselves rather than to be the fake versions of themselves required to keep up the pretense of the fake warlord, when they are free to be themselves, disaster ensues. The whole thing breaks down. There is at least an implication here that fakery is the glue that holds this thing together. This is a deeply ritualized, deeply formalized, fantastically hierarchical society in which everybody is playing a role and all the roles are very clearly defined. But nonetheless, there is an assumption that the roles need to be played by the genuine articles. They are to be played by the people who are not imposters, not impersonators. But actually, in such a society, and All societies have these elements in them. 21st century society is ritualized and hierarchical, and the roles all come with etiquette and ornament, and to hold high office is to play a part. This has always been true. It will always be true. Under those conditions, it is not clear that people being themselves is the best way for these roles to be played. The thief turns out to be exactly what is required by the role. Because he is so terrified of doing the wrong thing, he does nothing. And by doing nothing, he does the right thing. Until he tries to do something of his own initiative, ride a horse. And then everyone is released from their burden. Of course, they are still enacting their roles. The generals know that the son is leading them to disaster, but he is now their lord, and they have to follow him, and they see their men cut down. You see the rage, you see the anger, but they cannot resist. They have to do what they are required to do by the hierarchy. But they are doing it as themselves now, and it is as themselves that they will be destroyed. And then the film ends with the death of the Kagemusha, the death of the impersonator, who is now a man in rags. He witnesses the funeral, and then we see him as a bystander witnessing the climactic battle. And he sees all the things that he stood for, all the things that he fought for in his 3 years, destroyed by the idiot son. It's not his son, but it kind of is his son. It's the man that he slapped down at the great clan conference. It's the man that he put in his place. And now that man has destroyed everything. And he is completely, heart-rendingly, grief-strickenly crushed by witnessing this disaster. A man who, when we first see him, says, "Boil me or broil me, I don't care," by the end, seems to be the person who is most invested of all of them in keeping up the pretense. He picks up one of these flags, the flag of the clan, and in a mad, quixotic act, long after the battle is done, he charges and he is slain. And he is washed away in the river, and we see his body simply being washed downstream. And it's a perfect counterpoint to an earlier moment in the film, when the real warlord is dead. Initially, they think, we can't keep this a secret. We are going to have to tell the world that he's dead. So a ceremony is arranged. In his instructions, it's known that he wants to have his remains deposited in a lake, which is the lake which he feels has a special resonance for him. So an elaborate ceremony is set up in which a boat rows out into the middle of this lake, and the body of the warlord, which is in a giant ornate jar, is tipped off the side of the boat into the lake and sinks. And this is a great ritual, a beautiful ritual. It is a beautiful ceremonial death and ceremony of death. But then it's decided that they are going to have to keep up the pretense. Actually, they can't afford to let the world know that the warlord is dead. So now they have to pretend that this wasn't a burial. And so an edict is put out, which is that the warlord is alive, the warlord is fine, but because this is the lake with which he has a special affinity, he wanted to pay tribute to the deities of the lake, the gods of the lake. So he arranged for a giant jar of olive oil to be deposited in the lake as a kind of offering, an offering to the local gods. And so there wasn't a body in this jar at all. People are told it was oil. It was a jar of oil. His death, his funeral, was not his funeral. That was not his body. And then at the end, we see the Kagemusha washed away downstream. His death is also effectively unmarked and unknown. No one notices it, no one sees it. These two ends could not be more different. One deeply ceremonial, one full of reverence, the other one just another corpse washed down the stream. They are the opposite of each other, as throughout this film, the Kagemusha and the warlord, played by the same actor. They are two sides of the same person, but they are also complete opposites, the thief and the general, the great man and the nobody. Different, the same. So it is with their deaths. Completely different, one ceremonial, one without ceremony. The same, one not marked, a lie told about it. It wasn't his body, it was just oil. The actual depositing of his body was not noted. The other, also not noted, because nobody saw it. At the end of this film, the thing that unites the two men is the thing that unites everyone. Death is the great leveler. There is now a pair of bonus episodes out to accompany this series. The two episodes are about one film. The film is Shoah, Claude Lanzmann's epic documentary about the Holocaust. It's a very important film. The subject matter is not easy. We wanted to put the 2 episodes out together, and they are available on PPF Plus. To get PPF Plus, to get these bonus episodes, but also all of our bonus episodes for this series, all of the series that we've done this year, all of them have bonus episodes. Just subscribe. You can click on the link in the show description or go to ppfideas.com. It's very straightforward. You will also get, now and in the future, ad-free listening. I am aware that we haven't done anything particularly Christmassy this year, and to be honest, putting out 2 episodes about Showa is not particularly Christmassy. But I did want to say, on my behalf, and also on behalf of my wife Helen, who happens to be the producer of this podcast, just how much we've appreciated all of the input and feedback and support we've had from our listeners this year. It's been really fantastic. We couldn't appreciate more everything that we hear from you and get from you. We love making this podcast. We really look forward to all the things we're going to be doing with it in 2025. And we wanted to wish all of our listeners a very happy Christmas. Coming up next in this series, we move to the end of the 1980s and Spike Lee's brilliant film, Do the Right Thing. This has been Past, Present, Future, brought to you in partnership with the London Review of Books. Past, Present, Future is part of the Airwave podcast network.